The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had stood for 11,000 years. Its walls were made of crystal that sang when the light touched them. 100 different species had walked through its doors. They had argued and debated and made decisions that shaped the fate of billions. The hall had seen wars begin and end. It had witnessed treaties signed and broken. It had watched civilizations rise from nothing and crumble into dust. But the hall had never seen anything like this. Ambassador of the delegation stood at her podium and stared at the empty seats across the chamber. The human section had 20 chairs. All of them were empty. The lights above those chairs had gone dark. The translation devices had been disconnected. The name plates had been removed. The humans were gone. Remembered the day they first arrived. She had been young then, barely old enough to serve as a junior. The human delegation had come through the doors with wide eyes and nervous smiles. They wore strange clothes and spoke in loud voices. They asked questions about everything. They wanted to know how the crystal walls were made. They wanted to know why the delegates floated instead of walked. They wanted to know if the cafeteria served something called coffee. The senior delegates had laughed at them. The humans were so young. Their species had only achieved space travel 3 centuries ago. They were like children at a gathering of ancient scholars, curious and eager and completely out of their depth. But the humans did not seem to mind. They smiled at the laughter. They took notes on everything. They attended every session and listened to every speech. When a debate went late into the night, the humans stayed until the end. When other species argued over territory or resources, the humans asked if there was a way for everyone to share. The council found them amusing, naive but harmless, the kind of species that would learn how the galaxy really worked once they had been around long enough. That was 200 years ago. Now the human seats were empty, and no one was laughing. Council Arbiter Al called the emergency session to order. He was old even by the standards of his species. His scales had faded from bright blue to pale gray. His eyes had seen 10,000 council votes. His voice had announced decisions that changed the course of history. But his voice trembled when he spoke the words that everyone already knew. The humans had left. Not one human or 10 humans or a single delegation. All of them. Every human in council space had departed within a span of 40 cycles. Their embassy stations had gone dark. Their trade ships had turned around. Their colony worlds had sealed themselves behind communication barriers that no council technology could penetrate. They had not declared war. They had not issued demands. They had not even filed a formal complaint. They had simply left. The chamber erupted into chaos. 100 voices spoke at once. The demanded to know if this was some kind of attack. The wondered if the humans had suffered a catastrophe. The suggested that perhaps the humans had finally realized they did not belong among the great powers of the galaxy. Said nothing. She was thinking about the last council vote before the departure. It had been a human proposal, a joint humanitarian mission to the Outer Rim. Millions of refugees had been displaced by the expansion. They were dying on barren worlds without food or medicine or shelter. The humans had asked the council to help. The debate had lasted 3 hours. They argued that the refugees were not council citizens and therefore not council responsibility. They pointed out that the mission would be expensive. They insisted that the refugees had brought their troubles upon themselves by resisting the expansion. The vote was 67-1. The one was humanity. Remembered the face of the human ambassador when the vote was announced. Her name was. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had served on the council for 30 years. She had proposed more initiatives than any other ambassador in history. Aid programs and refugee assistance and cultural exchanges and medical missions. The council had rejected almost all of them. When the vote was announced, did not argue. She did not shout or cry or storm out of the chamber. She simply gathered her documents into a neat pile. She closed her briefcase with a soft click. She looked around the chamber one last time. Then she nodded once and walked out. That was the last time any council member saw a human in person. Had not thought much of it at the time. The humans were always proposing things and getting rejected. They were always disappointed and then coming back the next day with new ideas. That was simply how humans were. Stubborn and optimistic and incapable of accepting that the galaxy did not work the way they wanted it to. But this time, they did not come back. The emergency session lasted for 12 hours. The council formed committees and subcommittees. They dispatched probe ships to human space. They sent diplomatic messages on every frequency. They even tried to contact individual humans through personal channels that some delegates had maintained over the years. Nothing worked. The probe ships were turned away at the border. The diplomatic messages went unanswered. The personal contacts had all been severed. Every human in the galaxy had simply stopped responding to the council. One of the junior delegates asked the question that everyone was thinking. What did the humans want? What would it take to bring them back to the table? Arbiter Al had no answer. None of the senior delegates had answers. For the first time in 11,000 years, the Galactic Council faced a problem it did not know how to solve. The humans had not attacked them. The humans had not threatened them. The humans had not even insulted them. The humans had simply stopped caring. And somehow, that was worse than anything the council had ever faced. Left the chamber long after midnight. She walked through the empty corridors and thought about all the times she had seen humans in these halls. They were always smiling, always talking to everyone, always trying to learn new languages and understand new customs and make new friends. She had taken it for granted. Everyone had taken it for granted. The humans would always be there. The humans would always be helpful. The humans would always show up with their proposals and their enthusiasm and their naive belief that the galaxy could be better than it was. Now the halls were quiet. The human laughter was gone. The human voices were silent. And realized something that made her heart ache. She missed them. She had not known she would miss them until they were gone. She had not understood how much light they brought until the halls went dark. She had not appreciated their warmth until she felt the cold. The humans had left without a word, without an explanation, without even a goodbye. And the council did not know why, but suspected she did. She suspected that the answer was simple and terrible and had been obvious all along. The humans had finally stopped hopping. And a galaxy without human hope was darker than anyone had imagined. Commander Al received her orders on a cold morning. She was to take her ship and investigate the abandoned human colonies. The council wanted answers. They wanted to know where the humans had gone and why they had left and what it would take to bring them back. Al was not sure she wanted to find out. She had served with humans before, a joint patrol mission along the Outer Rim. The human captain was a man named Danny Shaw. He had a loud laugh and a bad habit of singing old songs from Earth when he thought no one was listening. He made terrible jokes and shared his food with everyone and stayed up late playing card games with the crew. Al had found him annoying at first. Humans were always so emotional. They felt everything so strongly. Happy or sad or angry or excited, they could not seem to do anything quietly or calmly. But somewhere along the way she had started to appreciate it. The human enthusiasm was infectious. Their laughter made the long patrols feel shorter. Their songs made the empty spaces between stars feel less lonely. When the mission ended, Danny Shaw had shaken her hand and told her she was welcome on any human ship anytime. He had meant it. Humans always meant what they said. They were terrible at hiding their feelings. That was 15 years ago. Al had not seen Danny Shaw since. She wondered where he was now. She wondered if he had left with the others or if something had happened to him. She did not want to think about it too much. Her ship reached the first human colony after 3 weeks of travel. It was a world called New Portland. The humans had named most of their colonies after places on Earth. New Portland and New Austin and New Chicago. They were sentimental that way, always carrying pieces of home with them wherever they went. Al expected to find destruction, or at least chaos. When a species abandoned its colonies, there were usually signs of panic, overturned furniture and scattered belongings and the debris of hasty evacuation. But New Portland was pristine. The landing fields were clean, the buildings were intact, the streets were empty but orderly. It looked like the humans had simply stood up one morning and walked away. No rush, no panic, just a calm and deliberate departure. Al walked through the abandoned neighborhoods with her team. They searched houses and offices and schools. Everything was in its place. The dishes were clean in the cabinets. The clothes were folded in the drawers. The books were arranged neatly on their shelves. It was unsettling, like walking through a museum dedicated to a species that no longer existed. In one house, Al found a child's room. The walls were painted blue with white clouds. There was a small bed with a stuffed animal on the pillow. Drawings hung on the walls. A child had drawn her family. 2 adults and 2 children and something that might have been a pet. Below the drawing were the words, "My family," written in careful letters. Al stared at that drawing for a long time. Where had this family gone? Were they safe? Were they together? Did the child still have her stuffed animal? She would never know. Her team found the central archive building near the center of the colony. It was a large structure with tall windows and a sign that said Community Center in human script. Inside, there were meeting rooms and offices and a large hall with a stage. And there were message terminals, hundreds of them. Al activated the first one. A recording began to play. A man appeared on the screen. He was old with white hair and a kind face. His name appeared at the bottom of the recording, Frank Carter. "This message is for my friend and of the trade delegation," he said. "We worked together for 6 years on the grain exchange program. You probably don't remember me. We only met in person twice, but I remember you." He paused and smiled. "You taught me how to prepare tea the proper way. You said humans always made it too sweet. You were right. I've been making it your way ever since." His smile faded slightly. "I don't know if you'll ever see this message. I don't know if anyone will. But I wanted you to know that those years meant something to me. The work we did together fed millions of people. That matters, even if no one remembers, even if no one cares." He straightened in his chair. "I hope you're well, and I hope your family is healthy. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for in this galaxy, and I hope someday you understand why we had to go." The recording ended. Al played another one, and another, and another. There were thousands of them. Each one was personal. Each one was addressed to a specific individual from one of the council species. They talked about shared meals and collaborative projects and conversations that had happened decades ago. They thanked people for small kindnesses that the recipients had probably forgotten. But none of them explained why the humans had left. One recording stood out from the others. It was from a woman named Maria Santos. She was middle-aged with dark hair and tired eyes. "This message is for anyone who finds it," she said. "I know the council will send someone eventually. I know they'll want to know why we left." She looked directly at the camera. "The answer is simple. We got tired." She took a deep breath. "We spent 200 years trying to make the galaxy better. We proposed aid programs and they were rejected. We offered to help rebuild worlds and were told it wasn't our place. We begged the council to save dying species and were outvoted every single time." Her voice cracked slightly. "We gave and gave and gave, and the galaxy took and took and took. And when we asked for something in return, even just acknowledgement, we were told we were being naive. We were told that's not how the galaxy works." She wiped her eyes. Maybe they were right. Maybe that's not how the galaxy works. But that's not how humanity works either. We can't keep giving to people who don't care. We can't keep teaching our children that their worth depends on being useful to people who will never appreciate them. She stood up. So we're leaving, not to punish anyone, not to make a point. We're leaving because staying was destroying us. We're leaving because our children deserve to grow up in a place where kindness is returned. She walked toward the door of the recording booth. I don't expect you to understand. I don't expect anyone to care. But if you're watching this, I want you to know one thing. She turned back to the camera. We never stopped loving you, any of you, even the ones who hurt us, even the ones who ignored us, even the ones who laughed at our hope and called us fools for believing. Tears ran down her face. We just couldn't do it anymore. We just couldn't keep loving a galaxy that refused to love us back. The recording ended. Al sat in the empty archive building and watched the screen go dark. Around her, her team stood in silence. No one knew what to say. They had come looking for answers. They had found something worse. They had found the truth. Council Arbiter Al had not slept in 30 cycles. His scales had gone from pale gray to almost white. His hands trembled when he held his documents. His eyes were sunken and tired. The reports kept coming. Every day brought new information about what humanity's departure had cost the galaxy. The medical supply chains were collapsing. Human ships had carried 23% of all interstellar medicine. They had delivered treatments to colonies that could not afford their own transport. They had staffed emergency response teams that answered distress calls regardless of which species sent them. Now those supply chains were broken. Colonies that had depended on human deliveries were running out of essential medicines. Hospitals on a dozen worlds were rationing treatments. People were dying. The engineering networks were failing. Human technicians had maintained the stabilizers on 47 space stations. They had kept the communications relays operational across 3 sectors. They had provided free repairs to vessels from species that could not pay. Now those stations were drifting. Communications were spotty at best. Ships that broke down in human-maintained sectors had no one to call for help. The educational systems were crumbling. Human teachers had staffed schools on 92 worlds. They had taught children of species that could not afford their own educators. They had developed curricula and training materials and donated them freely to anyone who asked. Now those schools were closing. Children who had learned to read from human teachers had no one to continue their lessons. Libraries that humans had built and maintained were gathering dust. Al read each report carefully. He noted the numbers and statistics. He saw the graphs showing declining trade and failing infrastructure and rising mortality rates. But the numbers did not capture the worst of it. The worst was the silence. The council chamber used to be full of human voices. They asked questions during every session. They proposed amendments to every resolution. They spoke up for species that had no voice of their own. Now the chamber was quiet. Delegates went through the motions of governance, but something was missing. Some essential energy had drained away. One of the junior delegates had remarked that sessions felt shorter now. Al realized it was because no one proposed humanitarian amendments anymore. No one asked if there was a way to help the less fortunate. No one suggested that maybe the council should do better. The humans had always believed the council could do better. They had never stopped pushing for more aid, more cooperation, more kindness. Everyone had found it tiresome. Everyone had wished the humans would just accept how things were. Now they had, and the council was worse for it. Al called a special meeting of the senior delegates. They gathered in a small chamber away from the main hall. The representative was there. Even an observer. The topic was simple. What could the council do to bring the humans back? The representative suggested a formal apology, but for what? The council had never officially wronged humanity. They had simply outvoted them. They had simply rejected their proposals. They had simply ignored their concerns. That was not a wrong. That was how the council worked. The representative suggested economic incentives. The council could offer the humans favorable trade terms, exclusive contracts, access to restricted technologies. But the humans had never asked for any of those things. They had never demanded payment for their service. They had simply given and given until there was nothing left to give. The observer made a different suggestion. Perhaps the humans had not really left. Perhaps this was a negotiating tactic, a way to extract concessions from the council. Al shook his head. He had known humans for 200 years. They did not play games like that. When humans were unhappy, they said so. When they wanted something, they asked for it. When they made threats, they meant them. The humans had not made any threats. They had not asked for anything. They had simply left. That was what made it so devastating. The representative pulled up the archives. She showed the assembled delegates a list of every human proposal submitted to the council over 2 centuries. There were 4,612 entries. Aid programs for struggling colonies, refugee assistance for displaced populations, cultural exchange programs to build understanding between species, medical missions to worlds suffering from disease, environmental restoration projects for damaged ecosystems, educational initiatives for developing worlds. 4,612 proposals. The council had approved 31. Al stared at that number. 31 out of 4,612, less than 1%. The representative scrolled through the list. She highlighted the rejected proposals. Each one had been voted down for the same reasons. Too expensive, not our responsibility, not how things are done. She stopped on one proposal from 50 years ago, a human initiative to create a permanent disaster response fund. The fund would be used to help any species affected by natural disasters, regardless of their council standing. The vote had been 83-1. The humans had been the only supporters. The debate transcript was preserved in the archives. Al read some of the statements from senior delegates at the time. The humans are naive. They do not understand how resources work. Perhaps when they have been here longer they will learn. It is admirable but impractical. We appreciate the sentiment, but the galaxy does not work this way. Al remembered making similar statements himself. He had thought he was teaching the humans how things really were. He had thought he was helping them become more realistic. Now he wondered what kind of galaxy they might have built if the council had listened instead. The meeting ended without resolution. No one knew what to do. No one knew how to fix something that had been breaking for 200 years. As the delegates filed out, one of the junior aides approached Al. She was young and nervous. She held a data pad in her hands. "Arbiter, I found something in the archives. I thought you should see it." She handed him the data pad. It showed an old recording from the early days of human membership on the council. The first human ambassador was giving a speech. His name was Ben Cooper. He was young and optimistic. His eyes were bright with hope. "We know we are new here," he said to the assembled delegates. "We know we have much to learn, but we also believe we have something to offer. Humanity has always believed that the measure of a civilization is how it treats those who have nothing to give in return. We believe that kindness is not weakness. We believe that compassion is not naivety. We believe that a galaxy united by care for each other is stronger than a galaxy divided by self-interest." He paused and looked around the chamber. "We may be wrong. We may be naive. We may learn that the galaxy does not work the way we hope. But until that day comes, we will keep trying. We will keep proposing. We will keep believing that things can be better." He smiled. "Thank you for letting us be here. We will do our best to be worthy of your trust." The recording ended. Al handed the data pad back to the aide. His hands were shaking. That speech had been given 200 years ago. Ben Cooper had believed every word of it. He had believed the galaxy could be better. The Council had spent 200 years proving him wrong. And now the humans were gone. Al walked back to his chambers alone. The corridors were empty and quiet. No human voices echoed off the crystal walls. No human laughter filled the air. He sat at his desk and stared at nothing. The Council had not been cruel. They had not been malicious. They had simply been indifferent. And indifference, Al realized, was its own kind of cruelty. The worst kind. Because cruelty acknowledged that someone existed. Indifference pretended they never had. Commander Al spent 3 years searching for answers. She visited every abandoned human colony. She watched thousands of recorded messages. She read reports and studied archives and interviewed anyone who had ever worked closely with humans. And then she was 93 years old. She lived alone on a small moon in the tertiary sector. It was a cold and barren place. The kind of world that nobody wanted and nobody cared about. It was also the location of a human cemetery. Al landed her shuttle near the small dwelling where lived. It was a simple structure made of metal and stone. Smoke rose from a chimney. A garden grew beside the door despite the harsh conditions. Was waiting outside when Al arrived. She was a small woman with white hair and deep wrinkles. Her eyes were sharp and clear. She wore simple clothes and held a walking stick in one gnarled hand. "I wondered when someone would come," she said. "Took you long enough." Al did not know what to say. She had expected the last human in Council space to be bitter or hostile, just seemed tired. "Come inside," said. "It's cold out here and I'm too old to stand around waiting for aliens to figure out what they want to say." The inside of the dwelling was warm and cluttered. Books lined every wall. Photographs covered every surface. Al saw images of humans she did not recognize, smiling faces at celebrations, families gathered around tables, children playing in fields. Made something she called coffee. It was a dark and bitter drink that humans seemed to love. Al accepted a cup to be polite. "You want to know why they left," said. It was not a question. "Yes." Sat down in a worn chair by the window. Outside, the cemetery stretched across the valley. 40,000 white markers in neat rows. Humans who had died in service to the Council. "Do you see those graves?" asked. Al nodded. Each one of them was someone who believed in the Council. Someone who left their home and their family to serve a galaxy that didn't know their name. Diplomats, engineers, doctors, teachers, soldiers who fought in wars that weren't their own. She sipped her coffee. "When the flooded, we sent 9 million volunteers. 9 million, from a species of 11 billion. We rebuilt their coastal cities stone by stone. 800 of our people died in the aftershocks. 800 graves somewhere out there." Her voice was calm, matter of fact. The Council didn't send a thank you note. Not even a mention in the official records. When the representative gave his report on the disaster recovery, he didn't name a single human who had helped. Al said nothing. "When the plague hit, our doctors worked for 6 years developing a cure. 6 years of research and testing and failed experiments. They gave the cure away for free. Didn't ask for a single credit, just wanted to help." Set down her cup. The Council voted to award the research credit to a laboratory that had contributed funding. Funding. As if money was the same as 6 years of work. As if writing a check was the same as watching your colleagues die from the disease they were trying to cure. "I did not know that," Al admitted. "Nobody knows it, that's the point. Humans did things and nobody noticed. Humans sacrificed and nobody cared. Humans died and nobody remembered." She stood up and walked to the window. Every single time a species faced extinction, humanity voted to help. Every single time. We proposed rescue missions and refugee programs and emergency aid. And every single time the Council told us we were being naive, that resources were limited, that we couldn't save everyone. She turned to face Al. We never wanted to save everyone. We just wanted someone else to try. We just wanted to stop being the only ones who cared. Al understood now. She understood why the messages in the archives had been so personal, why the humans had not issued demands or filed complaints, why they had simply left without a word. "You gave up," she said. Shook her head. "No, we grew up." She walked back to her chair and sat down heavily. "When I was young, I believed what we were told, that if we just worked hard enough and proved ourselves worthy, the Council would accept us, that someday they would see us as equals, that our service would earn us respect." She laughed bitterly. "It took me 70 years to realize that would never happen. No matter how much we gave, it would never be enough. We would always be the junior species, the naive ones, the children who didn't understand how the galaxy really worked." She leaned forward. "But here's the thing. We did understand. We understood better than anyone. We understood that the galaxy was cold and cruel and indifferent. We just refused to accept it. We kept believing that things could be different, that kindness could spread, that if we showed the Council how to care, they might learn." Her eyes were hard now. "We were wrong. You don't teach people to care by caring at them. You just exhaust yourself. You just break your own heart over and over again." Al thought about her time with Danny Shaw, the joint patrol mission, the laughter and the songs and the card games. She had taken it all for granted. She had never told him that those moments meant something to her. "Why did you stay?" she asked. Looked out at the cemetery. Someone had to tend the graves. Someone had to remember. Those 40,000 people deserve to have their names spoken, their sacrifices honored, even if no one else cares. She was quiet for a long moment. "The others offered to take me with them. I said no. I was too old to start over, and besides, I needed to be here when someone finally came looking." "Why?" Smiled. It was a sad smile, the smile of someone who had seen too much and lived too long. "Because I wanted to explain, not to the Council, not to the politicians and diplomats who ignored us for 2 centuries. I wanted to explain to someone like you, someone who served with us, someone who might actually understand." She reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. It was old and worn. Human script was written on the front. "This is for you, from Danny Shaw. He asked me to give it to whoever came." Al took the envelope with trembling hands. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message. "Dear Al, I knew you would come eventually. You were always the curious one, always asking questions, always trying to understand. I want you to know that our patrol mission was one of the best times of my life. I know I was annoying. I know my singing was terrible. I know you thought humans were too emotional and too loud. But I also know you stayed up late to play cards with us even when you were tired. I know you learned the words to 3 of my songs even though you pretended you hadn't. I know you covered for me when I accidentally insulted the ambassador at that dinner. You were a good friend, even if neither of us ever said it. I'm sorry we had to leave. I'm sorry I couldn't explain. I'm sorry you're probably confused and hurt and maybe even angry. But I hope someday you understand. We didn't leave because we hated the Council. We left because we loved it too much. We gave everything we had and it was never enough. Now we're going to build something new. A place where kindness is returned. A place where our children can grow up believing that caring for others is not a weakness. I hope you find happiness, Al. I hope your people learn to do better than ours did. I hope the galaxy changes. But if it doesn't, I hope you know that there was one human who was glad to serve beside you." Your friend, Danny. Al read the letter 3 times. Tears ran down her face. She had not cried in 30 years. She had not thought she remembered how. Watched her in silence. He talked about you often, she said softly. He said you were the best officer he ever served with. He said you never treated him like a child. Al folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket. What do I do now? She asked. Shrugged. That's not for me to say. I'm just an old woman tending graves. But if I had to guess, I'd say you go back to the council and tell them what you learned. Tell them why we left. Tell them what it cost us to care. She stood up and walked to the door. And then you decide what kind of galaxy you want to live in. One where kindness is forgotten, or one where it finally matters. She opened the door. The cold wind blew in. Now go, I have graves to tend, and you have a story to tell. 100 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one could have predicted. The split into 3 factions after a civil war that lasted 2 decades. The formed a federation with former enemies and became one of the most powerful alliances in known space. They achieved something they called technological transcendence and retreated into their own digital realm. But some things stayed the same. The human chair in the council chamber remained empty. No one sat in it. No one moved it. It simply stayed there, gathering dust, a reminder of something that had been lost. Every new species that joined the council asked about the empty chair. The senior delegates told the story. It changed with each telling. Some versions painted the humans as heroes who had been driven away by an ungrateful galaxy. Others described them as naive idealists who could not handle the harsh realities of interstellar politics. The truth was somewhere in between, but the truth had a way of getting lost over a century of retelling. The younger inherited her grandmother's seat on the council. She was named after the original who had served during the human era. She had grown up hearing stories about the strange and wonderful species that had once walked these halls. Her grandmother had told her about human food and human music and human laughter. She had described the way humans would stay up all night debating ideas, the way they would cry at sad stories and laugh at terrible jokes, the way they seemed to feel everything so intensely that it exhausted everyone around them. The younger had never met a human. No one alive had met a human. The barrier around human space remained impenetrable. 17 delegations had been sent over the past century. All of them had been turned away with the same polite message. Humanity thanks you for your interest. We wish you well. Please do not return. No exceptions, no negotiations, just silence. The younger often sat in the chamber after sessions ended. She would look at the empty chair and wonder what the humans were doing on the other side of that barrier. Were they happy? Were they thriving? Had they built the better world they had dreamed of? She would never know. But she had one thing that connected her to that lost species, a small box that her grandmother had left her. Inside was a letter, handwritten on real paper in a language that her grandmother had spent 30 years learning. The letter was from the last human ambassador, the woman who had walked out of the council chamber without a word and never returned. The younger had read that letter 100 times. She had memorized every word. Sometimes she read it aloud to herself in the empty chamber, just to hear the ideas spoken. Today was the opening session of the new council year. Delegates from 87 species had gathered to begin another cycle of debates and votes and compromises. The chamber was full of noise and movement. Translation devices hummed as 100 languages filled the air. The younger stood at her podium and waited for the session to begin. She watched the other delegates take their places. She watched the empty human chair gather dust. And then she made a decision. She walked to the center of the chamber. She did not ask for permission. She did not wait to be recognized. She simply walked to the middle of the great hall and began to speak. I want to read something to you, she said. A letter from a human ambassador to my grandmother. It was written 100 years ago. It was never meant to be shared, but I think it should be. The chamber fell silent. Delegates stopped their conversations and turned to listen. The translation devices worked to convert her words into 87 languages. The younger unfolded the old paper carefully. Her hands were steady. Her voice was clear. "Dear," she read, "by the time you read this, I will be long gone, and so will my people. I want you to understand something because I think you always tried to understand us, even when understanding was difficult." She paused and looked around the chamber. "We did not leave because we hated the council. We left because we loved it too much. We gave everything we had, and we would have kept giving until there was nothing left. That is what humans do. We cannot help it." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But love requires something back to survive. Not grand gestures, not monuments or treaties, just the small recognition that we mattered, that our work was seen, that when we asked for help, someone would listen. Her voice grew stronger. "We waited 200 years for that recognition. It never came." She turned to face the senior delegates directly. "So we left, not to hurt anyone, not to prove a point. We left because staying was destroying us slowly, and our children deserved better than to inherit our tiredness." She looked down at the letter. "I hope the council learns from this. I hope that when the next young species arrives, full of hope and eager to help, you will remember us. Remember what it cost us to care. Remember what it cost you to forget." She folded the letter and put it away. "The galaxy is vast. There is room for kindness in it. I hope you find some." She paused. "With respect and, despite everything, with love." The chamber was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of those words hung in the air like something physical. Then something unexpected happened. One delegate stood up, then another, then another. Slowly, one by one, the representatives of 87 species rose from their seats. They did not speak. They did not clap or cheer or make any sound at all. They simply stood. It was not an apology. It was too late for apologies. It was not a promise. Promises had been broken before. It was just recognition. Finally, after 100 years, the galaxy was acknowledging what it had lost. The younger walked to the empty human chair. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small bundle, flowers from her, blue and white and delicate. She placed them beside the chair. No words, just a gesture, just acknowledgement. The session continued after that. Debates and votes and compromises, the usual business of governing a galaxy, but something had shifted, something small but important. When a proposal came up for humanitarian aid to refugees in the Outer Rim, the vote was different. Not unanimous, but closer than it had been in a century. And when a junior delegate suggested creating a fund for disaster relief, no one called the idea naive. Perhaps it was too late. Perhaps the humans would never return. Perhaps the barrier would remain sealed forever, and the empty chair would continue to gather dust until the crystal walls crumbled to nothing. But perhaps not. Perhaps somewhere beyond that barrier, humanity was watching. Perhaps they saw the flowers beside the empty chair. Perhaps they noticed the votes that went differently than they used to. Perhaps they were waiting to see if grief could turn into wisdom, if wisdom could turn into change, if change could turn into something that finally mattered. The galaxy had taken 100 years to learn what it had lost. Now the question was whether it could remember. And far away, beyond the barrier, an old woman named tended 40,000 graves and waited to see what would happen next. She had been waiting for a long time. She could wait a little longer. Because hope, she had learned from the humans who lay beneath those white markers, was the one thing that never truly died. It just waited for someone to believe in it again.